Welcome once again. So today's conversation is on a very interesting topic. At least I don't think many times we get to understand what the budget of our neighbor is. So we just thought let's constructively and objectively understand how Pakistan's budget is at this point in time. It's always we did not that we are doing it because India and Pakistan have a very sensitive relationship, but yes, we did try and understand New Zealand's budget. We did try and understand Singapore's budget, the American budget. So we just thought let's try and understand the Pakistani budget as well. So moving forward, I would thank Vignesh and Jugal for their efforts to get this for us today. Yes, so these are some of the terms. We shall look at them as and when we get through the presentation. Yes. Brief introduction of the landscape of Pakistan, both from an economic and a demographic perspective. What's the economic progress they've made, major fiscal policies, reforms proposed, the challenges which have happened, which they are facing during the COVID, what the budget is, its philosophy, major sectoral allocations, key macroeconomic indicators, and of course the receipts and expenses. And we will also try and look at some of the relevant statistics in this regard. So Pakistan is the fifth most populous country, and between 1950 and 2012, its population grew by 400%. And the majority of southern Pakistan's population lives around the Indus River. Karachi is the most populous city, and in the northern half, most of the population lives about an arc formed by cities of Faisalabad, Lahore, Rawalpindi, Islamabad, Multan. I mean, for those of us following cricket, you would understand more Peshawar. All these cities have large cricket and very popular cricket grounds. There are around 75 to 80 known Pakistani languages, and primarily there are six major languages in Pakistan, and uh, po- possibly 95% of the population speak the six languages: Punjabi, Pashto, Sindhi, Saraiki, Urdu, and Baluchi. And Pakistani rupee is the basic currency. And the agenda is to understand the scope of the budget. And the best part is the budget was presented in June 12th, so well in the midst of COVID. So this is one government which has had the opportunity to assess the impact of COVID before the budget is being presented. That's what makes it a lot more interesting for us to understand. Let's try and understand what they did in the year prior to this. So the in the first 3 quarters of FY20, so Pakistan has a July to June presentation budget year. The current account deficit reduced by 73% from 10 billion. It's come down to 3 billion, which is a great thing. Trade deficit decreased by 31% from 21 billion to 15 billion. Possibly, if you notice, even in India at this point, the trade deficits on a month-on-month basis is low because we don't import as much as we used to. The primary surplus of 0.4% has been witnessed for the first time in the past 10 years. And primary surplus is nothing but it's a component of the fiscal surplus, what we call as fiscal deficit, when the government doesn't have funds, which is comprised of current government spending less current income from taxes and excludes interest paid on government debt. See, if we exclude interest on government debt, see, even if you look at a country like India, a significant chunk of our borrowing, if not this year, it's going to be more than 100%. I mean, until last year, the interest payout was more than 100% of the borrowing, which means that we had a primary surplus. But this year, based on the budget proposals, the borrowing is going to be more than the interest on debt, which effectively means we're going to borrow to pay debt. That's very very scary. But it's nice to see Pakistan had a 0.4% surplus. The revenue of Federal Board of Revenue has increased by 17% um, from 3,800 billion in 2018-19, which is nothing but your total tax collections, and which was supposed to reach a target of 4,800 billion. and the non-tax revenue was 1,100 billion, which is expected to reach about 1,600 billion. And all these are in Pakistan rupees, friends. So to give you a perspective, the exchange rate between Pakistan rupee and INR, if I'm not wrong, is 1 is to 2.19. So where 1 Pakistani rupee equals 2.2 INR. So we just have to divide it by 2.2 to arrive at what we need. So, and in terms of dollar, 1 is to 160. 165 should be an appropriate conversion for those of us who are comfortable understanding the numbers in dollars. Similarly, in 2018, 19, the forex reserve, so this is a scary part, it declined from 18 billion to under 10 billion, bringing the country literally to the brink of default. So that's something which Pakistan should be concerned about. And however, in having forex reserves intact in 2019, the higher forex debt of 6 billion have been repaid as against 4 billion in 2018-19. So there has been a good extent of repayment which has happened, but the reserves are still precarious at this point in time. So interest payments in the last 2 years on heavy loans of the past amounted to 5,000 billion, that you would see is literally equal to their revenues, what they've collected. 4,800 billion is the revenue target. And a package of 152 billion has been announced to the merged district of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. And the current ruling government has claimed that there has been more than 1 million jobs which is created, and FDI in Pakistan increased from zero point 0.9 billion to 2.15 billion, predominantly in IT, oil and gas, and financial business sector. Debt management has been improved by shifting 74% of the domestic debt portfolio to long-term debt, which resulted in reduction of domestic borrowings from 14 to 10%. Due to the reforms introduced by the government, extended fund facility of $6 billion was approved by IMF. So this is one thing, but there is a lot of criticism circulating in the media that the Pakistani budget was effectively dictated to or drawn to favor the IMF for this reason. And Bloomberg has ranked Pakistan Stock Exchange as one of the top performing markets in the world in December 2019. And there has been a ratings upgrade from B3 negative to B3 positive. So major fiscal borrowers, no borrowing has been availed from the State Bank of Pakistan to finance budget proposals. Exchange rate regime was freed from unrealistic government control, and so they moved to more market-oriented exchange rate. No supplementary grants were allowed, and the public sector development spending, or the PSDP as they call it, was facilitated by removing restrictions. Debt management improved with saved $240 billion, and existing stock of public guarantees was capped. Structural reforms in public entities were introduced. National tariff policy was approved, which effectively led to an increase with the objective to improve competitiveness, increase in employment. Similar to Make in India, Make in Pakistan is the identity, and that was something which they were trying to promote. Tax refunds have increased from 113 billion to 254 billion. So that's almost about 5%, 5 to 6%. In India, it's roughly about 9 to 10% is the tax refunds. I mean, here we're not trying to compare the two countries, but yes, we do. Being someone who follows the Indian numbers so keenly, by default, even when we did the US budget, we were comparing wherever possible we could the Indian scenario as well. So, under the structural reforms for public finance management, the PFM Act 2019 has been introduced, which the government has laid as mid-year budget review report in the National Assembly, and pushed the budget manual, budget strategy paper, and a statement of contingent liabilities. A statement of fiscal risks will be part of the annual budget statement. Treasury single account rules and procedures. Reforms in pension systems have been initiated, which will save about 20 billion. So this is similar to, if I'm not wrong, the fiscal responsibility and budget management, the FBM Act, which we've got. think in India it was introduced, if I'm not wrong, in 2003. And austerity and restructuring of the government, task force for austerity and restructuring was set up by the Prime Minister. And he wanted to privatize 43 organizations, wind up 8, and transfer 14 organizations to provincial governments and merge 35. So complete restructure was introduced. This restructuring bring down the financial burden, like what we're doing in form of divestment, uh, to beef up coffers and minimize governance, and similar to that. The SRS program is a federal unconditional cash transfer program for poverty reduction. Again, similar to your what should I say, your Mandrega or the direct benefit transfer. As a result, 8,20,000 ineligible beneficiaries have been removed from the list of beneficiaries, and 2 regasified LNG plants, which were near closure, have been revived, and the improved performance of critical organizations such as NHA, Pakistan Port, and Karachi Port Trust have significantly expanded their revenues. Ease of doing business, Pakistan has moved from 136 to 108 out of 190 countries. In June, Pakistan was placed under grey list. So this is something which even Mauritius is battling at this point. And out of 27 items, they've claimed that 14 have been largely addressed and 11 are partially addressed. In 2 areas, concerted efforts are being made for implementation. So, to give you a perspective, FATF does an audit twice a year, and they review every jurisdiction on this 27 points. And based on the outcome of this 27 points, the jurisdiction is either whitelisted, grey listed, or blacklisted. So, what's the impact of COVID-19 on the finances? The economy was paced down, obviously, everywhere. There's been a negative growth, and from a GDP growth of 3.3% projected, it's now expected to grow by a negative, not grow, contract by 0.4%. The projection of overall budget deficit has been revised upwards from 7.1 to 9.1%. And the FBR is like Revenue Board, Ministry of Revenue, or Department of Revenue as we call it. The loss has been projected at 900 billion, while the non-tax revenue of the federal government has been reduced by 102 billion. So they're talking about 1,000 billion dip in collections. Exports and remittances have been adversely affected. Unemployment and poverty has increased. So I think that's where we are. And I don't think any country, if it were to pass a budget now, will have anything positive to say. The government has approved a stimulus package of more than 1,200 billion, out of which 875 has been funded through the federal budget. 75 billion has been allocated for purchase of medical equipment, protective kits, and payments to health workers. 150 billion has been allocated for 16 million vulnerable families and shelter homes. 200 billion allocated for cash transfer to daily wage workers. I'm just getting through the relief in indirect taxes of 15 billion on food and health items, payment of 280 billion to farmers for wheat procurement. So there has been small and marginal reliefs throughout the spectrum of the society. What is significant is, I wouldn't say significant, the price of petrol has come down by 0.42 per liter and diesel by 0.47 per liter. So that relief itself is about 0.70 to the population. And no withholding tax on payments made to builders and developers. The policy rate has been cut by 5.25%. That's a massive reduction from 13.25 to 8%. Payroll loan of 96 billion has been given on subsidized interest of 4% for 3 months. The principal amount of loan to the tune of 491 billion has been deferred, and loans of 75 billion rescheduled in 707, close to a million, I mean, what, 3/4 of a million cases, similar to the moratorium what we've been talking here. And for households and banks, have been allowed to lend an additional, and for households and businesses, banks have been allowed to lend an additional 800 billion with increased borrowing limit and repayment of principal amounts deferred for 1 year. Extension in time period for meeting performance requirements and for shipment of goods in case of EXIM. Relaxation in conditions for long-term financing facility. time limit for realization of export proceeds extended to 270 days for from erstwhile 4 months. Obviously, because they understand that exporters cannot realize immediately, and exporters can directly dispatch a shipping document without routing it through the bank. And limits on advance payments for imports has been increased. Now let's. So these are the measures what they've taken, friends, and I think a couple of interesting things are 50 billion payment for electricity bills of 3 months for 3 million small businesses, 100 billion for deferral of power and gas bill payments due from industries, and 100 billion to uh, Board of Revenue and Commerce for issuance of refunds to exporters, 200 billion for cash transfers to daily workers and employees, and 150 billion to 116 million vulnerable families. So technically, the government is trying to do whatever is possible within its means. But yes, COVID measures are by and large similar across the globe. So when we look at the budget, this is interesting, friends. You look at these are all in rupees in billion. As I said, if you went to get into INR, you should divide it by 2.2. You want it in dollars, you should divide it by 170. So let's look at the revenue side. The tax collection is 4,900, and other taxes another 500, and there's a non-tax revenue of 1,100. So the gross revenue is 6,500, and the provincial share which the share of revenue which goes to the provinces, like what we call as the state. Like in India, we have this. What should I say? We have our the share of state governments in GST. Something very similar to that is what we're envisaging here. And the net revenue receipt for the government is 3,700 billion. Now, as against this, friends, when you look at the expenses, look at it, the interest payment alone is 2,900 billion. So that's close to 3,000. So, which is almost, when you see, is roughly about 80% of the revenue collection is used only for interest on loans. Now, that's scary. And this 80% of the total tax collections. So, to give you a perspective, in India, our the central government's collection of taxes about 15 lakh crores, excluding state government share of GST. And out of this 15 lakh crores, we had an interest outflow of about 6.5 lakh crores. It's about 40%. So that clearly shows the ability to pay and the solvency scenario. And defense expenses, another area for which Pakistan has always been written about, is roughly about 1,000 to 300 out of the total net revenue of 3,007. That's close to about 30 to 33%. So 32 to 33% of the revenue receipts happen towards defense expenses, whereas I believe in India it's roughly about 20%. So we have a 3 lakh crore of defense expenses, or 4 lakh crore out of 15-16 lakh crores. So we're talking about something similar at about 20-25% on a much larger base. But yes, so not too far behind. And this excludes defense pensions. So defense, including defense pension, the number is definitely higher. And how is the shortfall? If you see the total expenses is roughly about 7,100 billion, and this is being offset because the total revenue, the net revenue receipt is only 3,700. So there is a shortfall of roughly about 3,400. So it is this 3,400 is based out of privatization 100. It's like your disinvestment. Provincial surplus from the states is 242, but the rest, and there is an external receipts of 810. Non-bank borrowing is 1,400 and bank borrowing is about 900. That's what makes up. So effectively, this deficit being made up by and large by borrowing and external financing. So that's what puts the position precarious. So if we were to try and understand the budget philosophy here, no new taxes or levies. The focus was to balance Corona with fiscal prudence and deficit, and keep the system sustainable. The government also wanted to have successful continuation of the IMF program, and for which the protection of social spending under ESA's program, which is fund support to the vulnerable segment of society, was important. And they wanted to carry forward the stimulus package, keeping development budget at adequate level to inject economic growth. Moving on, yes. Defense and internal security was kept, the expenses was kept constant, and they were also looking at the Naya Pakistan housing project for affordable homes. Austerity measures have been introduced. Subsidy regime will be rationalized to provide targeted subsidy, something again which we are also doing in India. The funding for special areas, um, Azad Kashmir and Gilgit Baltistan to ensure development, and 7 tribal provinces and districts and 6 frontier regions have been selected for that. Moving on, this will give you a cross section of how the expenses are being incurred and the highlights of the budget. Total revenues is about 6,500, which includes revenue and non-tax revenue. Transfer to provinces is about 2,800. So the net revenue is about 3,700. Expenses about 7,100. And the budget deficit is about 7% of the GDP, with the primary balance at 0.5%. So sectoral allocations. So for the vulnerable, which is the ESAS, the budget allocation is 208 billion. For higher education is about 64 billion. Housing is about 1.5 billion, or 30 billion. Grants to special areas and provinces about 56 billion and 55 billion respectively. Remittance incentives in initiatives to expand the forex balance is about 25 billion. Transportation 40 billion to Pakistan Railways. Kamyab Jawan for is about 2 billion. Federal government hospitals about 13 billion have been provided to the Ministry of National Health Services. E-governance is about billion rupees. Artists welfare, again about a billion. Special funds for technology upgradation, viability gap funding, together is about 600 million. Agriculture is 10 billion. And of course, in Pakistan, we saw the recent attack of locust coming there, so this number had to be increased to keep that in mind. Developmental objectives to recover from negative growth of 0.4 to 2.1% is their target. Current account deficit to be maintained at $4.4 billion. Reduce inflation from 9.1 to 6.5%, and increase FDI by 25%. Currently, last year we saw it was $2.1 billion. Developmental measures, 73% of the funds have been allocated for ongoing projects to avoid any cost escalation, and 27% for new projects. And a special focus on social sector has been done and the allocation has increased from 206 to 249 billion. Corona responsive and other national calamities, a special development program has been formulated, to which 70 billion rupees has been allocated. And for water shortage, another 69 billion has been allocated. Energy and power, to target the gap between the electricity demand and generation, another 80 billion rupees has been allocated. National highways, 118 billion, and 24 billion to railways. Health and population, 20 billion. See, what is really unfortunate when you look at the budgets of both India and Pakistan is the extent of allocation to health, education, and R&D together is a fraction of the expenditure our economy spend on defense. I mean, that's something which both the governments need to have in mind, uh, because at the end of the day, I mean, if the society expands, I mean, you wouldn't improves or elevates themselves to a higher aspiration level. You would obviously not require any of the physical forces which are otherwise relevant in primitive societies. But of course, governments have their priorities and elections have to be won. So as far as education is concerned, 5 billion has been allotted to improvement on education system and 30 billion towards excellence in education in the field of research, science and information technology. Because if we look at the most advanced geographies, I mean, I would say US spends about 2.5% of GDP on 2.5 to 3% on scientific R&D. China spends about 2.5%. India spends about a percentage thereabouts. Israel spends about 4.8%, which clearly shows where they are in the curve of civilization. Science and information technology for projects relating to e-governance, IT, ITES, and launching 5G, and the 20 billion has been made available. Climate change 6 billion, food and agriculture 12 billion, and other miscellaneous sustainable development goals of the UN 20 billion has been allotted. So if you look at the summary of budget receipts, friends, the total proceeds, we've seen this consolidated fund 7,200. That's basically because of tax receipts and non-tax receipts, capex, what we have seen. And what is interesting is there is a significant markdown thanks to COVID. In direct taxes, they've marked it down by almost 35 to 40%. And indirect taxes, the markdown is again a similar number of 40%. So that's a massive, massive hit on. But the government expects non-tax revenues, receipts from civil administration, to be significantly higher this year to make up for the loss. I mean, we do not know where that's going to come from. Moving on, the budget expenses. This is the unfortunate reality of COVID. Expenses have more or less remained the same. But if you see what's likely to happen post COVID for the next year, there is a uh, marked dip in the expense provision for public services. Defense is remaining, this is going up marginally. Public order and safety, marginal increase. Economic affairs is coming down. Housing and community amenities is significantly going up from 2,500 to 35,000. All these are in million, friends. I'm only looking at the significantly developed areas. Current expenditure on capital account is likely to go from 210 to 1,500 almost. So overall, the scenario on expenditure is there's going to be a 3 to 4% expansion in the expenditure, and yes, this is going to be bridged by way of banking credit from the banking sector, which is going to increase the loan from the State Bank of Pakistan, and thereby obviously there is going to be inflationary pressure if the State Bank is going to keep on lending to the federal government. And if you look at the key macroeconomic indicators in this regard, the real GDP growth targeted is 4%, but they're expecting a negative for 1920 revised. Uh, Tax revenue as a percentage of GDP is likely to increase from 10.9 to 12.6 over the next 2 years. That's great. But if you look at the developed economies, they're all about 25-30%. So India is also struggling to break this to 12% barrier. We are also stuck there. So current expenditure again is likely to come down. Developmental expenditure is likely to go up over the next 3 years. Revenue balance from minus 4.1 is likely to go to minus 1.5. Every government, when they present their projections for the next 3 years, it's always interesting. But yes, when it comes to reality, there is always an excuse to push the numbers forward. Some of the relevant statistics, if we had to look at, this is interesting. The trade deficit is plummeted. You see, the exports have not gone down by much, but the imports have significantly come down because thanks to lower consumption. because of COVID initially. Public debt to GDP, they are inching closer to 80% on the debt to GDP ratio, and that's significant. That's definitely significant for a developing economy. India also in this regime. Tax to GDP ratio is about uh, 10 and a half, 11%. This is likely to go to 14 and a half. Expecting that to grow immediately to that number is slightly utopian at this point in time. Fiscal deficit is currently at 9.1%. That's significant, which is likely to come down by 7.5. But with tax revenue not expected to grow at what is being predicted, we do not know what that number is going to be for the next year. See, one thing what is good from the tax basket as far as Pakistan is concerned is the indirect tax collections are at least twice the number of direct taxes. And that's very interesting, very, very interesting, because that's where the basket has to be for all countries. At least that looks to be the mantra for expansion of tax base. So in India, unfortunately, the challenge is both are equal at this point in time. So which effectively means we have a headroom to double our GDP, double our GST collections in the coming years, and also expand the tax to GDP ratio. So these were some of our thoughts. It was just a first attempt to try and understand what Pakistan budget looks like, and what we can learn from comparing other economies or other societies. Because ultimately, friends, budget is as much an economic document, it is a social document. It reflects the position of the society and its aspirations, and how how the governments and economies react to certain situations. So it's very interesting to see a lot of commonalities, uh, at least on the negative areas. There are a lot of commonalities. When I say negative, it's like the lower allocation towards R&D, towards education, towards agriculture and innovation, and higher allocation towards subsidies. But what is very interesting is the governments are having a similar outlook, and we wish and hope that uh, the society as such thrives, keeping other things aside. So thank you, and catch up again on another conversation of relevance later during the week. Thank you.